actually continuing to give a summary of the things we learned in Brazil at the Immersion Conference. And so I'm talking to kind of bring more light into what it means to be a cell group based church. Because you can be a church with cell groups, which means the church's program is focused on programs, which would be the weekend service, and if we're going to do a discipleship training, we do it in a big meeting, and versus one-on-one discipleship or 1 on 2 or 3. The other thing of a church with cell groups is the senior pastor is usually not really involved in it, has someone on staff that's what their job is, to do something with the small groups or cell groups. We want to be a cell group based church, which means this is the core of our church. This is what we really champion and highlight in our ministries, because we really believe this is the best means for us to truly disciple our people. So I was at a training this week in Phoenix for church growth it was led by Rich Nathan of the Columbus Vineyard in Columbus, Ohio. It's a church of 12,000. And Brian Anderson, who's the church of the North Phoenix Vineyard Church, which is a church of about 4,000 or 5,000. So these are two of the most significant churches in the Vineyard movement, and they were teaching us. And it was interesting. Rich Nathan said at a church of 12,000 people, 75% of their people are involved in small groups. That stunned me. And so they did actually a little seminar on increasing discipleship through small groups in your church. And a lot of it dovetailed with what we're trying to do with cell groups. And there's some nuances of the cell group ministry that are unique and different. But I think what we have continually felt the Lord saying, keep going. And we are still in process, realistically, of our church transitioning from being a program-based church to effectively becoming a fully cell group-based church. And you guys are the core. And it's up to us together to make this happen. And so I want to talk about some of those basics of what we need to do. So if cell groups is truly the base of our church, you can continue to model and train your cell group members that when they come to church on Sunday, they're coming to worship, they're coming to be fed, but they're also coming to connect with people that aren't in cell groups yet. And so whenever you meet people, there should be intentionality in us that we meet them, we greet them, we introduce ourselves, we can ask them about who they are, where they've come from, are you new to the church? And basically, eventually, we want you and the people in your cell group to be able to just say, hey, are you in a cell group yet? Because if you're not, we'd love to invite you into our cell group. Now, we don't want our cell groups to become like churches, because what churches do is they steal sheep from other churches, right? So if someone is already in a cell group, celebrate that. Say, that's awesome. Stay in your cell group and make the most of that cell group. Invest in them. So you celebrate that. It's the same thing if they are visiting from another church. So give them the same message. Hey, that's great that you come from so-and-so church. We encourage you to stay in your church and make the most of using your gifts to help that church. And we're just glad that you came to visit us. Feel free to come visit anytime, but stay in your church. Right? That needs to be a consistent message that we give. And I really do believe that God honors that heart. And honor other pastors, honor other churches on a continual basis. And I try to do that. I will say that's a great church. I know your pastor. Your pastor is a great person, and I'm glad you're there. As people come and if they're new, you can say to them, man, we are so honored that you're here to visit us. And we want you to be in a church community that you can be loved and that you can be discipled. We also want you to eventually be able to explore what God has gifted you with and for you to help us to grow. That's how we kind of give that picture of a cell group, that as in community together, we're helping others to grow and they're helping us to grow. Okay? So everyone gets to play. That's what I love about cell groups, is that's what creates an environment that everyone gets to play. So in a big program church, everyone comes and watches the show where only a very select few get to play. And so how are people discipled, which means becoming more like Jesus, right? And what did Jesus say to do? Go and what? Make disciples, heal the sick, proclaim the kingdom of God, heal the lepers, raise the dead. So that's what we get to do in cell groups together. So the emphasis is on building relationships through the cell group ministries. Hebrews 10:24 through 25 says, do not forsake the assembling of each other, but meet and encourage, congregate and minister together. Keep doing what you've been doing, constantly in the temple and in where? Houses. So, from the very beginning of the church, they promoted going to the temple to celebrate. That's what we do on Sunday morning. But he said to meet regularly in the houses, because that's how we nurture and support one another to grow in our relationship with Christ. So as we go through this ministry, our goal is that eventually the church is so engaged in cell groups and that we're seeing people grow their cell groups, multiply them, supervise other leaders that they've raised up, and they continue to do this on a regular basis. Those are the people that God raises up sometimes to take pastoral positions in the church. And we're not there yet, but we're trying to get there. So like Eric Farmer, who became our facilities or Operations, thank you. I was looking for that word. Eric really was raised up through cell group ministry. He went through discipleship. He was involved in cell group. He eventually multiplied and led a cell group and has multiplied his cell group a couple times. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to see with people that we get to hire to be more engaged in the ministry here. And the emphasis is on discipleship. It's really fascinating in spending time with Pastor A. Puger, because I got to stay in their apartment with them. And so I got a lot of one-on-one kind of tutoring from Pastor A, which was an unbelievable honor. And so he told me, what I love about Pastor A, he's so humble. And he owns when they need to make changes because it's not working the way they wanted it to. And he said, I realized that I was wrong in emphasizing everyone needs to be discipled and disciple someone else. Because what it did is, as they moved to Sao Paulo, they brought their leadership team and they were developing a new church and helping people to grasp and embrace the cell group ministry, but they weren't discipled yet. So he said, I realized I was putting the old model of what they had in Santarém and Sao Paulo onto the new people, not Centrain and Fortaleza, they were putting that old model onto the new people, and the people were frustrated because they would say, I need someone to disciple me. And it would frustrate the cell group leaders because they would say, I have too many people I'm discipling. I can't disciple everybody. And so what he began to see is people were being discipled by getting deeper and more engaged in the cell groups. And then the leaders, pressure was taken off, and they began to focus on discipling the emerging leaders in the cell group. And that's kind of the model we've had to take because we have so many new people engaging in cell groups that haven't been discipled yet. And so they can't disciple other people because they don't know how to disciple other people yet. But we're going to get there, right? So don't underestimate the power and the significance of your cell groups and how they are helping people to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. Don't underestimate the power of having a lunch with 3 or 4 women in your cell group if you're a woman, and just being together and saying, how are things going in the home? How are you doing? And using those contacts to disciple the people in your group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate it when he said that. I actually said, thank you. That takes a lot of pressure off of me. Okay, so the one thing about cell groups that I really like, the reason we've used the term cell group is healthy cells multiply into healthy cells. And the best way to do that is the leader of the next cell group needs to come out of your cell group as you model to them how to be healthy leaders and how to run a healthy cell group and how to pastor the people in your group. And so this multiplication factor is how we should be growing the number of cell groups to reach more people. And that comes by you guys. That's why people say, I don't like this multiplication thing. But without multiplication, 2 things happen. We limit the number of groups that we have to disciple people. The second thing is we limit the giftedness in people in your group to be raised up and to explore and to flourish in using their gifts as they are branching out to multiply and lead another group. That's the beautiful thing that I love about cell group ministries is we are seeing leaders like yourself being raised up in a significant way. It's just, I think, the best model out there. A program-oriented church would say, if you want to become a leader, we're going to have a leadership training Saturday, November 2nd. Bring all your friends, and you do a 6-hour seminar on becoming a leader, and then you say, now go get them. But the other thing about multiplication and staying in relationship with those leaders that come from you is you get to supervise them and hold them accountable and give them the support that they need. Because it's hard, right? People have stuff. And we need support to, how do you handle this one? I've had a couple of issues that have come up lately. I go, wow, 22 years, I've never seen that before. So anyway, that's the value of being in relationship and supporting one another. Okay? So the important thing that I want you to know is you guys are, I think, our most valuable asset of this church. Because through you and the work that you're doing to pastor the people you're pastoring, they wouldn't have the pastoral care that they need. And so what would happen is mostly is people get frustrated. Well, that church doesn't care for me, and so they go to another church to try to find that. But when you love them, and you care for them, and you pastor them, they feel connected, they feel loved, and they feel committed to this church. And that's how we continue to grow and build the kingdom. All right? Are there any questions before I move on? Kevin?
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I will, Kirk. So like Pastor Abe and these guys, are they more committed to growing the cell groups than doing the preaching and teaching of the church? And is this something you see yourself with Corey coming on, where you would be somebody that would be stepping in the role of shepherding and discipling versus the daily preaching in the church? Because you can't do both, I wouldn't think. It would be very hard.
That's going to be an interesting thing for Corey and I to negotiate, because for our cell group ministry to continue to grow and thrive, Corey has to grab hold of the vision, he has to own it, and he has to be engaged in it. So one of the first things I'm going to be doing with Corey is having him come to our cell group, him and Julia, and seeing how we do it, and catch the heart and the vision. And we are talking about doing another immersion in Japan in April of this next coming year. And so I really want to make sure Corey and Julia are on the plane to that immersion, because that's how you catch the vision, really. Like Katie, when you went to Brazil, did it change your mind in any way about cell groups?
I think it changed it completely.
Completely, yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say, Andrea?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely a lot of good equipping information.
Yeah. It's amazing when you actually get to rub shoulders with guys that are totally bought in. And so Corey has to, when he takes over as the senior pastor, he has to be the voice of cell groups. He has to champion cell groups. And then I can do like cleaning bathrooms and helping park the cars outside. I won't change diapers though. I do draw a line somewhere. It's a good question, Kim. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, and just more of the structure from the top down.
Yeah.
The cell groups become very important in these churches, right?
Yeah.
And the
So
programs
I can see Corey and I trading off, doing like this training. That we will be like the visible face of cell groups, because it needs to be the core, the base of our church.
Whereas a program church, it would be the preaching
Yeah.
would be the main event.
Yeah.
That's what people are probably coming
And
to.
the other thing I appreciate when you see this when you go to Brazil, they put a lot of energy, a lot of focus on the service to make it quality, make it impactful, because they know that that also helps to build the cell groups. Because that's one of the things that draws people in. And it's like a funnel. The weekend service is like a funnel, but we want to, as they come more into the middle, get them involved in relationships and cell groups. And then out of the cell groups, their leadership develops and they want to serve in the church, and they begin to volunteer in areas that helps them to move beyond just sitting in the pew on Sunday. These days, sitting in the pew one Sunday a month. Does that make sense? Okay.
At the base of the funnel then is that three-legged stool, which is the big church cell groups and discipleship.
Yeah. Sarah was talking about what Abe talks about is a three-legged stool. What happens to a three-legged stool if you take one of the legs out? It crumbles, right? So he says it's the main service is one leg, cell groups is the next leg, and one-on-one discipleship is the third leg. That all of those are augmented together to make the whole stronger and to advance the kingdom. Because all of this is really about advancing the kingdom. That through cell groups and people being connected, we are able to reach more of the lost, to bring those that have been de-churched back to Christ. I mean, there's just so many different pools that people are engaged in their life right now as far as their spiritual journeys. that cell groups really are the glue or the honey that attracts the bee to, right? Okay. Well, you guys are awesome. And on your tables, take a few moments to share what you need prayer about and pray for each other in your leadership of your cell groups. Okay? Bless you guys.